Editing geospatial data is a daily necessity for many of us, whether we're in the field or the office. But without the right tools and strategies, this crucial task can become time-consuming, repetitive, and even prone to errors. Today, we're here to unlock the power of ArcGIS and reveal how it can transform the way you edit, streamlining the process for optimal efficiency. In this presentation, we will look at the importance of configuring layer settings tailored to your specific editing workflows. This customization ensures that you remain in control of your data's integrity, keeping your geospatial information accurate and reliable. We'll then explore some ways to make editing easier in the map viewer, be that geometry or attributes with smart forms. With ArcGIS Field Maps, you can take those smart forms out into the field so you can edit on the go. And finally, I'll just briefly explore some of the other tools we have available for editing in ArcGIS. I want to start by setting the scene. In our example today, we're going to focus on the land holdings at St Fagan's Museum. Let's say I'm an ecologist who is mapping the area, perhaps with some view to start natural capital or biodiversity net gain calculations. Biodiversity net gain, or BNG, is a term for some legislation that's coming in, which will mean that certain size planning projects and landholders will need to do more to ensure the maintenance of good biodiversity on site. Esri recognise that this is a spatial problem and are working with many organisations to develop solutions and approaches to help. While I'm here, I also need to do some tree inspections. To just look at the data in a bit more detail, Esri provide a wide range of base maps, including aerial imagery, but actually in this case I wanted a more detailed one, so I have some high-resolution imagery from our partner Ordnance Survey. This imagery is aligned to OS Master Map topography, so you can see it's incredibly detailed. First data set we have is the site boundary in red, and then some polygons showing the existing habitat, perhaps that we've already captured. These points represent trees, and this is National Tree Map data, this time from our partners Blue Sky. The National Tree Map is a nationwide comprehensive database of all trees over 3 meters high. It includes location, height, and canopy extents. I have just included the locations in this map. This is the workflow that I'm going to run through. So firstly, managing content and layer settings in ArcGIS Online. Then how do we configure and capture data in the map viewer? Then we'll look at how to push that data into field maps. And finally, how can changes to data be monitored in a dashboard? First up, managing content. When you publish or create a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online, you have many settings you can alter to improve your editing workflow. Firstly, make the layer editable by enabling editing, and then you can also choose to keep track of who's editing what and when. We'll look at groups in a moment, but here you can confirm that who the layer is shared with, and therefore who can edit it. We've restricted this layer to a certain group of users, but we have allowed them to add, delete, and update both attributes and geometry. If you wanted to, you could even restrict which layers within your feature layer can be edited. Additional options at the bottom allow you to restrict editors to only be able to see or edit the features that they have created. The settings we just saw were for the bottom feature layer here, habitat, polygons, everything. But what you can also do is create a view of that layer. So this is the same data, we've just created a couple of different views with altered settings. So the top one has no editing enabled at all, and the second one has been set up to only allow editing of attributes, not geometry. To add to that, we can set up groups to separate out our users. So the Edit Everything layer is shared with our ecologists who are in the full editors group, the one with the map icon, and the Edit Attributes Only layer is shared with perhaps just reviewers, and they're in the reviewers group with the clipboard icon. This allows us to control access to the datasets and ensure data integrity. When you add fields to a layer, you can dictate the type, length, and default value. And you can also set up lists, which means the editor will be able to choose from a drop-down of predefined values, reducing the chance of a typing error and maximising consistency. If you've set up contingent values in ArcGIS Pro, these will be honoured as well. Once you've created a field, you can then choose whether to make it editable or not. So we've seen how to go about setting up layers and views of those layers for different user groups. Now we want to open this data in the Map Viewer. So here we have the Map Viewer, and you can see the data from the slide earlier here in the map. To edit, I'm going to open the editing toolbar here. I'm going to zoom in on an area of interest. And you can see here we have our feature templates, which are derived from the symbology that we've given the layer in the map. I'm going to draw some grassland. So you can see now that my cursor has got a crosshair, and I'm going to change some of the settings. I'm firstly going to enable tooltips. So now when I put my cursor in the map, you can see that I've got a count of the area. I'm now going to enable snapping, which turns on geometry guides and feature-to-feature snapping. I'm just going to check that I've got my habitat polygon selected, because that's what I want to snap to. So now when I start to draw a feature, I'm going to draw this grassland in here. You can see that the area count will start changing for me, and I've got these guides to help me draw straight lines and right angles. When I complete my feature, I've got the vertices here, which I can use to change the shape or size of my drawing, and I can also rotate. But what's also appeared is the field capture form. So this is the information that I need to capture against this feature. I have two sections. I have my collected data here, and the first one is already captured for me because it is being pulled from the feature template. And now I've got habitat type, and what I can see from this one is that it is a required field, so I need to enter a value. When I do that, you'll see that some of my read-only fields down here will populate. So if I change this to grassland, we'll see that the distinctiveness and the required action change accordingly. I will populate the condition and the strategic significance, and we'll see that our total habitat units are not populating. So I need to go and have a look at what's happening there. So if I complete this feature for now, I can go and investigate those settings of my form in the Smart Forms panel. What the Smart Form is really doing is simplifying that editing process for the end user. It's letting them concentrate on the task at hand, rather than being presented with a huge long list of fields that they have to fill in, some of which they might not have to fill in for the tasks that they're doing. So we're really improving the sort of user interface, and we're also providing automated data checks. So using the settings in here, we can auto-calculate some fields like we just saw. So the first thing to note about the form configuration is we have these two groups, and we saw these two groups in the form just now, and they can be collapsed. They can be collapsed in the Map Viewer or out in the field as well. And that's again just to help with that, making it more manageable for the user in the field. In the first group, we have these data fields that need to be captured, and we've made sure these are all required. And this is all pulling from our initial setup, so these are already pulling those lists that we saw earlier. I don't need to recreate those. In the calculated group, you can see we have a few more fields than what we saw in the Map Viewer. But let's firstly start with this one. So this is the one that we saw automatically change when we changed the habitat type. And we can do that by changing some settings in this logic panel. And this is where we can start to set that dynamic behavior with arcade expressions. So arcade is a portable, lightweight and secure expression language that can perform calculations, it can manipulate text and evaluate logical statements. And what makes it quite unique is that it includes those feature and geometry data types, so it can speak to other layers. And a good example actually would be to perhaps include some environmental layers from the Living Atlas, our global authoritative collection of data, available with your ArcGIS Online subscription. And you could get Arcade to have a look at those layers for a field and say, am I within a feature in that layer? How far am I from that feature? And populate that value into a field in here. We did an Arcade webinar just last week actually that you can go ahead and watch. But there are of course lots of resources on the Esri Academy to get you started. And actually when you're in a script builder in Arcade, it also has some helpful guides and suggestions as well, which we'll see in a moment. So if we go ahead and look at this distinctiveness field here, the one that auto-calculated, we can see the calculated expression down here. And when we go in to edit it, we can see that what it's saying is if the habitat type, which we filled in, is modified grassland, then populate with low. If it's other neutral grassland, populate with medium, and so on. And I talked about those at the help and suggestions. So we have a list of variables here, and we have a list of the functions. And if you choose a function, you can go in and see some more information about it to help you build that out. Our next three fields here are actually hidden, so we've marked these to be hidden, and all they're doing is the same thing again, but creating an integer, a score for these values. And if we go ahead and look at I won't do this for all of them, but let's just look at one more. So we've used a slightly different code here, so we're saying if it's high, give it 6, if it's medium, give it 4. And what that's going to do is help to create this total habitat units value, a numerical value, for each feature in our layer. And I can see here that I don't have my calculated, I don't have a calculated tag here, so what I need to do is go and turn that on. So back over here, I can turn on my total habitat units expression. And what this is doing is it's going to look at the condition score, the distinctiveness score, and the strategic significance multiplier. It's looking at the area of the feature as well, and it's adding those together and multiplying them to give us that value. So if I save this, what I can do is go back to my edit panel, select my grassland, and we can see now that our total habitat units are populated with a value, so that's great. The other thing that I needed to do while I was here was I needed to do some tree inspections. So I'm going to select one of these trees. And you can see that again we have a form here with some simple information about the tree, its type, and whether it's under a tree preservation order. But we also have a related table, so we can see the inspection information as part of the related table. So again, I can come in here and I can edit these, but what I can also do is add a new record to the table. So I can adjust the height, and I can adjust the condition. And you'll see when I adjust the condition that my subsequent fields, risk and recommendations will disappear when I select good. And that's because they're not required if the condition of the tree is good. If I choose deteriorating, we can see they appear again, and I can give it a priority. And I have a free text here for recommendations. I'm just going to leave that for now, but I am just going to open the smart form for the table. So if I go to tables, select the table, and go back over to smart forms, so that we can have a look at that visibility expression. So again, we've got our fields here, and this risk field has got the visible tag on it. So we can see it's only visible if the tree is in poor, dead, or deteriorating condition. So if we have a look at this expression, and this time for the visibility, we can edit the expression in a bit more of a user-friendly manner. So we can say if the condition is not satisfactory, it's not good, then this field is visible. So now that we have our settings and our forms all configured, we can push this same dataset out to Field Maps. Field Maps is an all-in-one mobile application for map viewing, field data collection, location sharing, and providing situational awareness in the field. With Field Maps, as well as being able to capture data, users can measure in the map, work offline, and add markups for personal reference. ArcGIS comes with a Field Maps Designer application, which allows you to tailor the experience that your field worker is going to have. As well as setting up smart forms, there are other settings in here, such as creating a geofence. A geofence requires location sharing to be activated, but the field worker is in control of that at all times. If geofencing is set up on a map, they will be asked to enable location sharing, and they get the option to choose for how long, and they can always turn it off again whenever they want. And just to say as well that using geofences does require a location sharing extension in addition to the mobile worker user type. Once activated, when they approach, in this example, the study area boundary, the app will notify them with whatever message you've set up. If they have wearable tech, then that will notify them as well. The message is entirely configurable, so it can be set up for a buffer of a feature or for when entering and exiting an area, and it could also pull information from fields in the data. You can of course set up more than one geofence in a map. Another great example of the use of geofences is to set a message advising that certain PPE should be worn, should be taken off or put on in certain locations. Other settings that you can change include making the map available offline, so this will mean that the field user can select an area and the base map and all the data will be downloaded to their device. They can make edits and sync them back to the server once they get connectivity. And from here, you could set up predefined areas for the user to choose from. You may also want to set required location accuracy. Field Maps is compatible with many GPS enhancing devices, which would help this accuracy be achieved. You can change the frequency with which streaming data is collected, and this just means how often data is captured and updated in real time and synced back to the server. If it's location you're sharing, it could be how often that location is sent back. Finally, you can determine what happens to the map when a new feature is collected. For example, the default is to center the map and add a point at your location, but you might want to disable that and have nothing happen so the user can choose the point themselves, perhaps if it's an inaccessible area. And lastly, you can change the sharing permissions and access a link or QR code for ease of sharing with your team. I have a couple of videos now of field maps in action for a couple of different users. So you can see in the map there that this is the same data that we were looking at in the map viewer. Field maps can be accessed on a mobile or tablet, Android or iOS. So firstly, the full editor, who can make edits to both geometry and attributes. When we select an existing feature and choose to edit it, we can see that the vertices can be moved to adjust the geometry. And when we drag up to edit the table, we can see those same attributes in the same form that we saw in Map Viewer, including the ones that auto-calculate. And this is how it would look for the attribute-only editor. They can click a feature, but they have no opportunity to adjust the geometry, just the attributes. And for this example as well, you can see we've hidden the fields that auto-calculate for us. Okay, so the last bit of the workflow I want to show is how you can pull those data sets you've been editing through to something like a dashboard to start to monitor the data coming in. There are many different ways that you can now start to share that data to make it available to your team, your stakeholders, or even the general public. Of course, we talked about groups earlier, but in addition, from the item overview, you could export this to various file types, or you could create an app. So in this case, I've created a dashboard to start to summarize the data. So this is a dashboard. You can see we have our map with the same data, and we also have some widgets around the side. And this is entirely configurable. You can change the color, the theme, you can add your logo, you could change the size of the map, and you can add a huge amount of other charts, graphs, and text. But in this example, we have a pie chart here. We can hover over the slices to see the distribution of our habitat. And if we click the slices, the map will filter to highlight those habitats. We also have a table here showing our total habitat units for each of our habitat types. And for our tree inspections, we've got a count of the number of trees and the number of inspections that have been undertaken per year. And then we also have a table highlighting the condition risk of our trees. Another way we can interact with the map and the data is by making a selection of the trees, and you'll see that our tree-related widgets filter to just show those trees. So to summarise the editing workflow, we've seen editing in the map viewer and passing that information out to a field application. We saw that the smartform configurations are the same in both, and we saw how we can restrict certain users to certain workflows. I now just want to briefly touch on a couple of other options that we have. We've not talked about Suite. Suite for ArcGIS is a rule-based web editor which allows you to undertake much more sophisticated editing, such as ensuring you have no slivers, overlaps, or holes in your data. An extensive library of topology rules maintains data integrity. And in addition, you have the ability to configure dynamic map feedback, where you can see performance indicators change as you interact with and edit your data. As well as that, Suite can be used in the browser or as a standalone application in the field. If you want to learn more about Suite, well, I'm always very happy to talk about it, but we did also follow a presentation from NHS Fife at our Scottish conference with a Field Maps and Suite demonstration, so that can be found on our website, as well as the arcade one I mentioned earlier, and they also will be included in follow-up resources to this event. Or of course, you can use our desktop product ArcGIS Pro to do even more sophisticated editing with a huge range of tools from splitting and merging to editing in 3D. And additionally, I very briefly mentioned contingent values. In ArcGIS Pro you can set those up, so saying if I choose a certain value in one field, restrict the options available to me in another. Other useful tools in Pro include replacing geometry, extending and trimming lines, and generalizing. So if you've got a shape that you want to smooth out the boundary of, you can do that while preserving the essential shape. So just a couple of examples there, and again, same as Suite, we don't really have time to go into any more detail. So what I hope I've demonstrated today is just the start of how you can use ArcGIS to perform integrated and smart editing. We've seen how to customize and enhance some editing workflows to ensure you're getting the most accurate and detailed data that you need. We weren't able to touch on all the options you have in the system, some of which you can see here, but if you feel inspired to hear more, please do get in touch. Thank you.